Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. My name is Janie Montblanc, and on behalf of the Great Basin Fire Science Delivery Team and our partners, I would like to welcome you to this webinar, an overview of the Land Treatment Digital Library, presented by David Pilliod with the USGS Forest and Rangeland Ecosystem Science Center. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to let you know that you may ask questions of David or me at any time during this webinar by typing them into the questions pane of your control panel, which is at the top right of your screen. I can respond to questions addressed to me throughout the webinar, but I will field the questions for David after his presentation. I will show up in your questions pane as the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center, but it's really me. I would also like to let you know that whatever you do in your control panel does not affect the webinar presentation, so you are welcome to type a test message or test your audio at any time. Now, I would like to introduce our presenter. Dr. David Pilliod is a research ecologist with the U.S. Geological Survey Forest and Rangeland Ecosystem Science Center in Boise, Idaho. His current research includes fire, fuel treatments and restoration ecology, tools and techniques for monitoring wildlife habitats and communities, wildlife responses to climate, land use, and invasive species, and wildlife habitat relationships. He has been the lead scientist on the Land Treatment Digital Library since its inception in 2007. Welcome, David, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Ginny. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the many folks that have contributed to this project. It's been quite a labor of love, I call it, because much of the work is very detail-oriented and there's not a lot of recognition. And there's a whole team of people that have been responsible for the success of this project. First of all, Justin Welty is the project coordinator, and he's just done an exceptional job with designing the digital library and keeping it running on a day-to-day basis. And then there's a team of folks, students and term positions that have been working on the project for a number of years. And the funding has come from a variety of sources, primarily from the Bureau of Land Management. Some initial funding also came from Joint Fire Science Program and the U.S. Geological Survey. So the Land Treatment Digital Library was started as a way to house information about land treatments across initially the Great Basin and now across the western United States. And what it is it's a centralized digital library, so all the information is stored in one location. And the goal is really to store and archive land treatment data, and I'll get into more detail about what that means. The database was initially designed for BLM, and I say across administrative boundaries because what happened with land treatment information originally was that it was housed in individual field or district offices, often in file cabinets and bookshelves and so forth, and there was no place to go find information across regions or states, for example. And so this was the first attempt to really pull it together and dissolve some of those administrative boundaries. The current uses of the Land Treatment Digital Library really has come for providing information for data calls, which if you're in the federal government, data calls come in fairly frequently, and I'll give examples of those later on. And also the other use that we've been getting a lot of is just improving experimental designs, and that's for science-based questions as well as management-based questions. What we can do now is look across a population, so to speak, of land treatments and then take a sample from that for either going out in the field and examining conditions on the ground or looking at patterns through space and time. The other uses which are really picking up now that the system is being populated fairly fully is just as an information lookup tool. So folks at individual field offices can simply look stuff up on the internet essentially now, instead of having to go to file cabinets and search through and find information with quick queries. They can find the information they need on a specific land treatment, and it can go back in time, 50 or more years. So it's a useful tool that way, and then folks are using it for mapping, and ultimately I think it'll be used as a tool for resource management or resource plan development, really. So that could be anything from firefighting to fuels planning and other types of planning like that. The picture on the bottom just shows treatments in and around the Snake River Birds of Prey National Conservation Area, and in green there are seedings, and in yellow are herbicide spraying. So you can just see, an example of a land area, in this case managed by BLM, and the types of treatments that have occurred in that area. So as was mentioned, the project started in 2007, and it was started with some seed money from the U.S. Geological Survey, and then Joint Fire Science, through another project, was able to provide some funding to begin populating it for the Great Basin. And then in 2009, there was a memorandum of understanding and an interagency agreement signed between USGS and BLM to collect and enter legacy data. And that word legacy data is important because what it means is any land treatments that have already taken place. So the system's not designed to continue to enter new data. It's really designed to archive existing data. And that process is always changing, of course, because every year we progress into a new year, and last year's data suddenly becomes legacy data. So we're always playing a little bit of catch-up to keep it current. But ultimately, this system will butt up against a new system which is coming online in the next couple of years, where all current, and planned land treatment data will be entered into a new system, and then this will be the archival system that butts up against it, so it'll be seamless. Some of the accomplishments to date, we've visited and collected data from 90 field offices, and that has been also a labor of love. This means traveling out to individual field offices and collecting information, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So far, we have over 20,000 treatments in the LTDL, as we call it. And we've also developed a data entry module, which is a standalone system. It's not part of the centralized database, but it's a standalone system that can be sent out to an office, and then folks can enter data into it, and then if they want to, they could send us the information, and it's all formatted the same way, so it's easily brought in. And that was a tool that was developed really as a need basis from different agencies that showed interest but wanted to do the data entry themselves. So what does the future hold for the LTDL? The data collection is almost complete. We only have 3 states remaining. Those states are California, Montana, and Colorado. So we're really nearing the end here. We have a whole lot of data still to enter, and if you visited the LTDL, you may have seen that some states are just beginning to be populated with information. We figure that'll be completed in 2015 or 2016. And then we'll be and continue to be doing an analysis and reporting phase where we're providing information to data calls and so forth as we go. So some of the services that are provided by this, as I've talked about a few of them, but we do a lot of these advanced queries where somebody will ask us for information about, for example, they'll say, I need to know where forage kochia has been planted across the western U.S. And our first response is the caveat that, well, we don't have all of the land treatments yet across the West entered, but for those that we do have entered, we can provide that for you. So ultimately, this could be a one-stop shop for information like that. Right now, it's just whatever we have in there so far. And if you look on the right side in that picture map, it shows the current holdings. I mentioned we have over 20,000 treatments. This is displaying 11,500 approximately treatments, and in blue there are seedings. So you can see those are widely distributed. Red are prescribed burns, the orange are herbicide applications, and then brown are these kind of soil vegetation manipulations like chainings, and then timber and thinning are in this aqua blue. And that just shows you, and it's not all the types of treatments we have in there, but just an example of the current holdings, and you can see that Colorado, Montana, and California are noticeably missing information, which we're getting in there slowly, or we will be as we collect the new information. We do these responses to data calls, which are fairly frequent, and mostly we've been getting this website up, and I'm going to demonstrate the website in a few minutes. It's a new website. We had an initial one, which was somewhat of a pilot, up and running for the last year or so, and now we're launching our new website, which has a lot more features. Data summaries can be derived from that. There's interactive maps. And then those with permission, and anyone in the Department of Interior, and then users by request can access archived information such as original documents. These documents can be plans or reports, treatment maps, photographs, monitoring data, and actually GIS data that can be downloaded as well. So there's 3 phases that we've been using to get information in and provide it out to folks. And this 1, 2, 3, I'll just walk through here in a minute. This shows the level of effort. So we were visiting all the BLM field offices in the western U.S., and there's 126 of them. We actually have 90 of them completed. That doesn't mean all the data from all 90 are in there, but we visited and gathered the information from 90 field offices. And this just shows the distribution of field offices in BLM across the West. So it was a Herculean effort to get all of this information into one place, and now it's in Boise. Sources of data that we go after. So we'll visit a field office, and then we need to meet with different departments or groups to acquire the information we need. And the types of teams that we're talking with are ESR, fire rehab teams, fuels teams, range, silviculture, weed treatments, wildlife. All of these sources of information may not be in the same office or same room, and sometimes we have to move around and talk to different folks to acquire the information we need. Sometimes we actually have to go out to warehouses where long-term data are stored. And what we do is we grab this information and bring it in. And the types of treatments we're looking at are chaining treatments, cuttings, riparian restoration, seedings, sprayings, thinnings, wildland number and interface treatments, just to name a few. And the map on the right shows land treatments in an area of Central Oregon, just to give you an example. So you can see the legend there from herbicide application and prescribed burn, seedings, and so forth. So there's a whole lot of information, and we do our best to get all of it. And we go back as far as we possibly can, but there obviously is a limit. And some of the older information, the information gets a little bit sketchy, and I'll talk about the limitations of that information in a minute as well. Things we do not collect while we're at field offices are grazing information, for example. You could consider grazing a treatment, but in reality, unless it is being done as a, for example, noxious weed control, it would not be considered a treatment. Things like water troughs, cattle guards, fences, and so forth are other things that we can't consider treatments. Now, sometimes they show up in the Land Treatment Digital Library because they're part of a larger project. So if there is a project that's, say, associated with a wildfire, and then there's maybe 10 treatments under that wildfire, some of those may include fencing, which is a frequent activity of basically letting allotments rest for a few years after a wildfire. Those kinds of fencing do get into the Land Treatment Digital Library. So if there's any confusion there, we're happy to explain. Data collection, as I mentioned, is just going through paper documents. And the field offices that we visit have to be very patient, obviously, because this is somewhat like going through dirty laundry. I mean, there's just record after record after record. Some of them are in 3-ring binders, and some of them are in file cabinets. And so our crews come in, they take the information very carefully, they scan it, and they put it back just the way it was. We're not taking truckloads of information of paper information back to our office here in Boise. What we're doing is scanning it into PDF format and then bringing the PDFs back here, and we're working off of that. But in the process, we don't want to miss anything. We don't want to have to go back. So we try to scan everything we can. And sometimes there's a lot of redundancy where there'll be 3 or 4 versions of the same document. We try not to get that, but sometimes we end up with multiple versions, and we have to do a lot of cleaning later. We frequently run into paper maps where there is no GIS data, so we have to we basically scan the paper map, and then we later heads-up digitize it to bring it into GIS. Photos and so forth can be the same way. If there are GIS, we need to meet with GIS specialists, and we try to acquire as much digital data as possible, including reports and so forth. It really is a time saver. And then data entry is occurring back here in the Snake River Field Station, and we put it in through a Microsoft Access front. The back side of it is a SQL server, and then all of this is linked through ArcGIS 10. So it's a spatial database. All the information comes in, has to have a geographic point of reference on the ground for mapping purposes. And then as the data, you would think it would just be a simple transcription process where somebody's just sitting there and typing transcribing the information. But unfortunately, if you're doing an analogy with biology, it's somewhat more like translation, where there's so much information we have to have specialized crews that know how to basically extract the information that's relevant and get it into the database. And so that's quite a bit of training goes into that. Currently, well, the full capacity of the land treatment digital library crew is about 8 or 9 people, and so it's a tremendous amount of effort to get all this information in, and there's a bit of training on the front end. Now, I did say it's translation. We don't do a lot of interpretation. The one thing we did not want to do is make interpretations about the information, so I'll show you how we get around that in a minute. So this is what it looks like. Most people would never see this because this is how the data are entered, and this is not how it's displayed on the website. But on the left side here, just to show you in this corner in the top left, is a data documentation tab. And this just shows the kind of information that we were able to collect, in this case plans, reports, monitoring data, photos, seed treatments, seed lists do exist. Project was on a paper map, meaning we didn't get GIS. Treatment was on a paper map. And then if we were able to get GIS, we would get information and list it here. So this says project Polygon shapefile, so there was GIS, but that also says here that some of them were just on paper format, so we got both. And then on this side it says project complete, whether data entry was complete, and so forth. So this is kind of our, we call it our library card because it keeps track of what information was available. And as you go back in time, this library card gets less and less populated because sometimes there may be just a plan. There's no report or anything else, just a plan. And we don't even know if that project was implemented. So we keep track of that with an understanding of whether projects were just plans or implemented. And then that allows users later to go through and basically select the quality of information they want. Maybe they only want to look at projects where we know there's proof, there's documentation that the project actually took place. There's other information. I'm not going to go into detail here, but here's a project data tab. It gives some information cross-walking to other databases like wildfire databases. It gives some information about the ground treatments that were taking place and the objectives of those treatments. And what we do is, as much as possible, we will put information into a queryable database. So up here it says select edit treatments. We go through and we will grab these as close to a treatment as possible that was listed and match that. But we also then go and copy paste quite a bit of the original text so that we know if somebody wants to go through and look up what was worded in the plan or in the report, they can see that, as well as they can go back and see the original documentation, which I'll show you in a minute. So you can go up here. There's 3 main tabs: project info, documentation, treatment. On the treatment tab, you get a whole lot more detail about the specific treatment. Treatments are nested within projects, and so if you were to come through a project, you may have 5 or 10 different treatments. And at the treatment level, you're getting into things like seed lists here, which I'll show in a little bit. You can get into some information about treatment effectiveness. You can get into information about success. Success is a tricky one. We only report success as it's reported in the original document. So if it says the project was partially successful, that's what we give it. We don't do any other interpretation. So the final of these 3 steps I was mentioning is the data use, and I'll just go through a couple examples here. So we have many, many data calls that we've responded to, and the examples include asking for all land treatments within sage-grouse habitats, ESR seedings in the Great Basin, northern Great Basin crested wheatgrass seedings, herbicide sprayings in southern Idaho. And you can imagine any one of these would take a long time to acquire that information prior to having the land treatment digital library. It could take months or longer, and sending people out to field offices and getting the information or asking the field offices to do these data call responses. It was just a cumbersome activity. Now with Land Treatment Digital Library, these types of data calls, we can respond to them in within an hour and get all this information to whoever needs it. So it's incredibly handy in that way. Other data uses include for science and management purposes. A large one recently is a project funded by the Joint Fire Science Program, and it was basically an evaluation of emergency fire rehabilitation projects across the Great Basin and looking at effectiveness. And this is going to result in a couple of papers. This is the report for the initial pilot, and then there's several papers that are going to be coming out. And I just want to give a little shout out to the folks that are working on those. And one of them is long-term effects of reseeding after wildfire on vegetation composition in the Great Basin shrub steppe. And then another one is greater sage-grouse habitat associations and the effectiveness of post-fire restoration in the Great Basin. There's a couple of papers that will be coming out in the primary literature in the next year, so keep an eye out for those. Two others that have been published recently in 2013, phenology-based remote sensing of post-burn disturbance windows in rangelands, and does Kochia prostrata spread from seeded sites, an evaluation from southwestern Idaho, USA. These are examples of papers that have contacted us, gotten information that then allowed them to either design their experiments or go out and conduct analyses in a much more effective way than they would have without the land treatment digital library. So we like to acknowledge those. So what I'd like to do now is jump out to the website itself. I'm just going to walk through a demo of that, and then afterwards I'll be happy to take questions. If you have any other specific questions, you can always email Justin or I, and here's the website link. We'll make sure to make that available to folks as well. Okay. Okay, here is the website, and hopefully I haven't been timed out. So this is the public website. We've made it so that folks from the public can access information and do some basic queries, but then there's a limit to how much information they can get. If there's a desire to get more information, then you have to use a login to get the details of projects, and login is just a security system that right now is set up for basically keeping information somewhat controlled. So there's ways to look at just summaries of what's in the Land Treatment Digital Library. This is a list. I'm going to scroll. I won't scroll too much so it won't bug you too much. There you go. So this is all of the holdings to date, and this is showing the number of treatments by major treatment category. So you can see these are just listings that we've somewhat grouped things together, like vegetation, manipulation, soil stabilization, and seedings, and so forth. And then this is number of treatments. In this figure down below shows acres, so you can see it either way. We figure these will be useful for folks if they're doing presentations. They need to grab information, and they can do a screen capture of this. You can also go and look for an individual state. Say, well, I'm in Idaho. I don't want to see the whole U.S. So you can jump to Idaho. Here's Idaho. And you say, well, I'm not really interested in all these. I just want to look at seedings, for example. So on seedings, we got in Idaho 2,526 seedings. You could click on that. And then here it's broken out by individual seedings. So you can get seedling planting, seedings unknown. This is ground seeding, green stripping, and aerial seeding. And it just is a way of seeing what records are in the office. If you say, well, I just want to know, actually for a specific field office, you could jump down to one of these field offices and just look at those that occurred in the Boise or the Burleigh, for example. If we were to scroll down here to the bottom, so this shows the seeding treatments based on whether the data came from implementation reports or just plans. And we break it out like this because we want folks to know the quality of the information. So in this case, there's 231 ground seedings in Idaho that just have plans. There's no other documentation. We don't know if they actually took place or not. Problem is, a lot of these are old, and sometimes there was no record keeping past the plan. And so some of these are probably real, so we didn't want to throw them out. But the reality is the information on these is very sketchy. Then you get up into these implemented. There's 1,408 ground seedings in Idaho where there's full documentation. And so this gives you a little bit of a filter to see the quality information that might be available for the kinds of questions you're asking. All right, so the next what I'm going to do is demonstrate how you can go through and do some searches within the Land Treatment Digital Library. You can do something using a key fields approach. So for key fields, you can come in here and say, okay, well, I want to look in, for example, the state of Nevada, and it tells you right down here what your selection is, Nevada. And I'm interested in Ely, and I'm interested in prescribed burns. So now it's telling you selected those things, and you can make it a finer search. You may be just interested in broadcast burning or pile burning. And you can look at all years, or you can say, no, I just want 2000 to 2008. So now it's, you've selected your year range and say, okay, run your query. What it does is it kicks back all of the treatments in the database that have met your criteria and lists them here. Now, this is what the public would see. They just can get this list. It gives them whether it was a plan or implemented, and then the year and the treatment. I'm going to have to move this for a second. I can't. I need to log in. There we go. So by logging in, you get to get another level of information. So now I'm going to jump in here. A different way of getting information about treatments is to do a treatment by these kind of identifiers that we call them. So you might be interested in a certain allotment. You could search within that allotment, or you could search for some fire that you know about. You have a Rangeland improvements database number, and you want to search for that. So this is basically crosswalks among all the different types of identifiers that you could use to find information. So this is that kind of lookup ability that a field office might find useful. I'm just going to search for project name, and you remember there's some project and it begins with 4. You can't remember if it's 4 mile or 4 wheel or something like that. And this is just going to either search at the beginning of the identifier or anywhere in the identifier and say, okay, well, let's just look anywhere where that word 4 appears in the project name and see what we find. So it kicks off all of the project names with 4 in it, and you can see the information here. Now we have this, because I've logged in, you get this view project details, so we can jump to some additional information. So I'm going to scroll down through this slowly. And what you'll see here is for one of these projects, this case Four Corners Seeding, 1959, you'll see some different dates. And what this is saying is that, say, the ground seeding went in 1959, but then a protective fence was put up in 1961. And they actually did some livestock closures in 1965. So you can get multiple years within a project. Each of these is listed as a separate treatment in that case. I'm going to jump down here to four-wheeler. Sorry for the scrolling. And let's look at some of the project details. So this gives you, here's your library card up in here that shows you what information is available. If some of this is sparse, you may look over and see, oh, the reason it's sparse is because there wasn't a whole lot of information that they had to work from. And this just gives a summary of the project. So it's the four-wheeler wildfire rehabilitation and seeding project on BLM land. It was started in 2006, ended in 2009. We have a cost there. The major treatments are aerial seeding, livestock closure, monitoring, and protective fence. You may say, monitoring, that's not a treatment. Well, BLM considers it a treatment. And so if it's listed in the project as a treatment, we included it as a treatment. We decided not to make decisions like that. We just included everything that was called a treatment. And the objectives that were listed were significantly, they listed a p-value, higher seeded species density within plots compared to controls, higher seeded species richness compared to controls, and lower invasive species density within plots. So these are the objectives that were listed for this post-wildfire treatment that took place. You can jump down. Here's the fire it was associated with, date it was contained, some fire information. This is a nice feature. This project overlaps a couple other projects. So this overlaps a project from 1987. Another fire burned there in 1987. It also overlaps an herbicide application that happened in 2001. So this is a quick way to see, and this gets updated automatically for all the projects, so you can see what other projects are actually overlapping your project. So there's our project map. It's a little one, and it shows the approximate location. You say, oh, I want to see that bigger. Let's scroll down a little bit more. We have treatment summary information. So here's the seeding information we're interested in, and you can click on these and get specific information about the treatments. So for this aerial seeding treatment within the four-wheeler project, you can zoom down here, and it gives you some information about the objectives of the seeding now, how many acres, some monitoring information. Gives some information, the monitoring results here. And then on the right side here, if you pay attention to this, this actually shows the seeding information, gives you some information like it was confirmed on paper. Frequently we just have purchase reports. We don't have details about whether the seed was actually purchased or not. We just have a purchase, so we don't know what was on the ground. But if this is confirmed on paper, we put that. It can also be confirmed in the field, so somebody was out there taking notes saying this was the exact amount applied on the field. It allows the user to filter and make decisions about the quality of information they want. Were there areas, controlled areas? Yes, they were. The controls were within the treatment. We can go down through here. This is the seed mix they used, and then here are the individual species. So Indian ricegrass, bulk seeds were 7,100 pounds. Their rate was 3.03 pounds per acre. We do calculate, or we do provide a pure live seed estimate that's provided if it's in the documentation. We don't make this up later. And let's just go through species by species and shows the application rates. On the left side here is generated from GIS, and this we do this in-house. So for the Polygon that we have for this treatment, you can see what was the average maximum temperature, and this is a 30-year average, 62 degrees for that site. The elevation maximum of the site is 7,000 and the lowest 5,000. So all of these fields are generated automatically, and we just clip to these different GIS coverages. And some of it can be useful for different applications, and we decided again not to make decisions about that, so there's some redundancy in here. It just depends on what you're looking for. So we give fire regime condition class, fire regime group, succession class. I'll jump down a little bit. Vegetation classification, this is in acres. This is in percent here, and this is in acres. So 608 acres was Great Basin pinyon juniper woodland. That's 25% of the treatment area. So there's a lot of useful information that can also be used for queries. Somebody may be only interested in treatments that occurred in PJ, but they only want to know where it was at least 25% of the area treated was PJ. They didn't want some little 1 acre or something like that. So there's ways to get at some really good information here. Okay, I'm going to jump back up and go back out to the project summary. The other thing that can be useful here is we have photographs. So if folks want to see what it looked like on the ground, they can click the photographs. And you say, yeah, what are these trays here? Well, they were doing an aerial seeding, and they wanted to know what was the seeding rate as experienced on the ground. And so they put these out, and then as the plane flew over, they were catching the seed, and they could see how much seed would actually fall on an area of that size. So this is whatever photo, we don't filter these photographs, so whatever was in the files we include. So here's the plane being filled up with seed. I'm just going to scroll a little bit here. Some people talking. Here's some ground photographs. And you'll notice also that there's, a lot of beautiful information here that doesn't exist. Date taken, direction taken, some notes. There's almost never information, unfortunately, about photographs. But we figure as people get more careful with the kinds of information they collect with photographs, this could be really useful as well. But most of it is very limited just because it's not provided. Okay. I'm going to show you one last way to do a query. This is using a map. So here's our area that we currently have information for. It'll go back out further as we pick up Colorado and some of these other states. But right now, you can zoom in and move things around. I'm going to move it to southern Idaho, a whole lot going on right here. As you move in closer, the quality of the map changes and you can get better resolution. But I'm going to do a search right on this area because there's so much going on right there. I really want to know. So I'm going to draw a polygon and say, why is that so busy? And right down here it says executing query, number of treatments selected, and it's running a calculation. There's a whole lot, so it's going to take a minute. Okay, so right just for that little area, and this is anything that overlaps that area. So the reason it's coming all the way down here is because some of these projects stretch this far up, like the Murphy complex. And it's saying there's 168 treatments associated with this area. That's amazing. We can scroll down here and look at some of these, 1963, okay, 2000s. And you can just, go down through. If one of these interests you, then you can click on the project details and jump to that, like I was just showing you for the four-wheeler project, and get the details. But this gives you a quick summary. So if you wanted to, you're interested, big knob looks interesting in the 2000s, it does list every treatment that took place in that project. So it gives you a quick reference. All right, you can do a photo search, you can do a document search. We do have a list of products. This is going to be changing all the time as new products come out. And then there is a list of frequently asked questions that, maybe a starting point if there's a question that somebody has, and if not, they can always contact Justin or I and get additional information. With that, I actually will reach out and ask for questions from the listeners. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, David. All right, if you have questions, please type them into your questions pane. And while I wait for those to come through, I have a couple questions. So remind me, David, the data, the treatments that go into this are from the BLM and what other agencies?
Right now, it's just the BLM.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And we have, if there are agencies that have expressed interest in entering data into the standalone module and then sending us the information. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, we will, with their permission, we will upload it into the system, which would be particularly nice because then we'd cross administrative boundaries between BLM and other agencies.
Yeah.
But currently, there's just a few records from National Park Service that have been provided to us and a few from the Forest Service. It's almost all BLM.
Okay. And then I had another question. If, say, someone, outside of the DOI wanted to do a seeding project or wanted to know if it was worth it, and they, wanted to look at a certain area, what successful seeding projects had been done in the past, could they email you and, get that information? Can you look?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, are those the type of things that you can look up and do for people?
It is, right. So those are the kind of query requests that we get where there's, it's just some of those you can do in the website, the current website, but mm-hmm. if you want the output, it's something that can be done quicker by us. We're happy to do it and provide it, and that's in that data analysis and reporting phase of the project where in reality it'd just be simpler to do those in-house and send them out. It doesn't take very long. And then sometimes what that'll do is generate additional questions, and then if we give access, folks can go through and look at the details of individual projects and treatments, look at the original documentation, and get the information they need. So it can be a starting point or it can be an endpoint, those data queries.
Great, thanks. All right, Mark Fries asks, can we import project shapefiles from the LTDL website?
Can you import project? Can you export?
Probably.
Yes, you can export GIS data, but ultimately the shapefiles can be exported. That's another example where if you wanted to know, so say somebody says, I want to have all of the polygons for aerial seedings in the state of Nevada. That's a query we should do and then just send them the shapefiles. That'd just be so much faster for us to do it in ARC10 than for them to try to do it one by one and download from the data, from the website.
Okay, thanks. All right, no, I don't see any other questions coming through. So if you have some more questions, you can type them in while I'm giving you some other information. I just want to let you know that a recording of this webinar will be sent to you automatically through the GoToWebinar system tomorrow, and will also be posted on our Fire Science Delivery website within the next few weeks, or maybe even tomorrow if I have the time. So if you have more questions regarding this webinar or other topics, or have requests for future webinars, please email or call me at any time. David's email and Justin Welty's email are up also, so you can contact them if you have questions about the Land Treatment Digital Library. All right, well, no other questions have come through, so thank you all for your participation today, and thank you, David, for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, have a great day, everyone.